Hello everyone from Northampton Community College, as well as those for tuning in. Happy Earth Day 2021. My name is Britt Chan. I'm the Vice President and Co-Secretary of Science Club at the Monroe campus. Today, we're going to talk about ways how we can, as humanity, be a friend to our home, our planet Earth, our magnificent planet Earth. Look at it, how beautiful it is. You got lights, you got sunny days in North America. It's a beautiful planet. So, how we can do things to promote conservation, reducing, reusing, recycling, as well as how we can do our small part in our homes or in our gardens, or maybe even in a bigger scale, like transportation, energy, as well as consumerism, and how our activity impacts our fellow wildlife animals as well. So, I'm joined by our wonderful team at the Science Club, including our president, Katrien, our co-advisors, Dr. Beatrice Villar, as well as Dr. Jackie Spiker. To do that, I'll hand it over to Katrien for indoor gardening. Katrien?
Hey guys, I'm Katrien Poels, the president of your Science Club, and I'm here to talk to you about the benefits of indoor gardening. In addition to oxygenating the air that we breathe, studies conducted by NASA have shown reduced VOCs in the air, such as formaldehyde. The humidity produced and required by indoor plants also reduces incidence of microbes, allergens, and even viruses. Other health benefits of keeping indoor plants include reduced blood pressure and an immune boost which speeds recovery from illness. The blessings of keeping a green space do not stop here. The presence of plants in the work and living space have been proven to reduce depression and anxiety while promoting creativity and productivity. Keeping indoor plants also exercises your sense of agency, the control you have over your thoughts and actions. When taking care of indoor plants, it's important to keep an eye on your lighting situation, whether or not you're watering frequently or infrequently, and whether or not you may have any mite infestations. Should you fail to do any of these, you may end up with dead shriveled leaves. In translation to your life, this has effects on interpersonal relationships, on your relationship with yourself, and on your relationship with the planet. Attunement is also exercised in plant care and is essential in many scopes of life. Because different organisms are evolved to distinct environmental conditions, we must attune or tailor our care in order to ensure happy, healthy lives. For example, this Phalaenopsis orchid is an epiphyte, meaning that it clings to cliff sides and bark. Therefore, it is potted in a soilless medium rather than bark chips. The container is clear in order to allow light through for the roots to photosynthesize. In contrast, this lithops or living stone has minimal requirements. Place it in light and allow it to dry between waterings. This Echivara succulent has been stretching in order to reach the light. This tells me that I need to place it in a higher lighting situation. Here I have a Fittonia, also known as a nerve plant. They are finicky, and I had it in an area that received drafts. Since I moved it from that area, it has sprung back up and developed new foliage. Moving to the chameleon enclosure, you'll notice a fern. This fern prefers high humidity environments and scattered light. Therefore, it is beneath the hammock which scatters the light within my tropical enclosure. My betta fish tank contains 2 aquatic plants. because they are aquatic, they are inside the tank. You may notice that the tank is wider than it is tall. This is because betta fish are native to rice paddies, meaning that they are horizontal rather than vertical swimmers. Here we have a cactus and succulent garden. Cacti and succulents, being native to the desert, prefer lower humidity, therefore they are placed the furthest away from my humidifier. They are also directly under the skylight to receive a maximum amount of sunlight. Many of my plants require high light. Because I could not fit them all on my floor space, we had to develop a hanging shelf system. This allows all of my lights to receive plentiful light. The plants beneath the shelf prefer lower light, such as these begonias, the purple passion, and the bamboo. Because of this, they're under the shelf, but they still do require light. Therefore, the shelf is clear. If we can apply attunement to plants, then we can apply it to everyday life. We can apply it to our relationship with other people, with our environment, and with ourselves.
How wonderful was that indoor garden thing? For outdoor gardening, we can always be a co-worker for our little critter friends, like bees, butterflies, and more. To do that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Beatrice Villar for that section. Dr. Villar?
Hi everyone, this is Professor Villar from Northampton Community College. Do you usually see bees and pollinators, butterflies in your backyard, or your neighborhood? Are there native flowering plants in your garden? Do you know how many? The answer to these questions are important because 75% of all flowering plants on Earth rely on pollinators to reproduce. And those plants provide a foundation for many food webs. But we're seeing a pollinator decline. And this is an important concern on our food production, human health, and ecosystem functioning. Do you know that monarchs butterflies can travel between 50 to 100 miles a day? It can take up to 2 months to complete their journey. The farthest butterflies travel 265 miles in one day. And some fly as far as 3,000 miles to reach their winter home. Pennsylvania is one of the winter homes. So what can you do to help these pollinators to reach their homes? It's not complicated. You can create a small garden in your backyard, on your deck. You can plant native species free of pesticides to attract these pollinators and these butterflies. You can volunteer to collect data about the number of pollinators and butterflies visiting your garden. Talk to your friends and neighbors about it and spread the word. The more, the better. Need help? Visit online sites working on monarch pollinator projects or contact the Science Club at the NCC Monroe campus. After building your garden, you can be certified as a pollinator friend. It's not complicated. Gardens should include a diversity of plants, different species that they bloom through the summer and the fall. I'm going to show you some examples of those plants that you can include in your garden. One of the most important plants for monarch butterflies is the common milkweed. This species is specifically important for the caterpillars. They love eating their leaves. But there's other milkweeds that you should include also in your garden. The swan milkweed, for example. Eastern purple coneflower is another important species to consider in your garden. It attracts many species, different types of pollinators. Their prevalent flowers will attract monarchs, bumblebees, honeybees, and many others. Wild bergamot is also known as the bee balm. It's a nectar source for monarchs butterflies, bees, and bumblebees. Goldenrod is an important plant as a late season. It will be used by honeybees, bumblebees to collect nectar at the end of the summer. Sweet scented joy pie weed is another plant to consider in your garden. The advantage of this plant is very resistant to dry and to partial shade. It will attract hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. Giant ironweed will also attract hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies for the nectar. So as you see, it's not complicated to build a garden. You can start by including a few of these species, and then little by little we add more. But it's important that your garden flowers through the summer and the fall. You include several different plants that will bloom in those different periods, and wait for your cleanup for the spring. Because many of these insects and pollinators, they nest over the winter in these flowers. If you need more help, including here more resources for you. Happy Earth Day!
How cool is outdoor gardening? And how we can be a co-worker for our little critter friends. Now, let's head back indoor, shall we? Now we're back inside. Now let's also head to the transportation, consumer, and energy side of things. So, here's some data and statistics. The United States today, unfortunately the majority, which means 2/3 of items goes to waste and landfill, only 1/3 goes to recycling. That's a lot of raw material out there, especially paper, plastics, and aluminum. So we definitely want to promote more recycling, understanding of recycling, as well as composting. So that way these raw materials can be reused and disposed of properly instead of going to waste and landfills. We're too reliant on long-distance sea and land freight for goods. So a recent occurrence that occurred, the Evergreen ship, the Ever Given, that got stuck in the Suez Canal in Egypt, that disrupted a lot of the supply chain. And there were talks about shortages of goods and products for certain countries. So that's all the more encouragement for local production. We're also too reliant on cars due to the spread out population density and distribution. So if you look at the map, the United States is much more, there's a lot of more homes in the United States instead of compact cities like in Europe and Asia. So we need to work our transportation system toward these kind of systems. We're too reliant on natural gas and petroleum as majority of energy source. Obviously, we still want them for winter and others, but we also need to head towards a conservation style. Here's a drone footage video of an oil rig performing its duties if you're curious on how it works. This is presumably in the Midwest, likely, but unconfirmed though. Enjoyed the video. Now to some statistics. As we talked earlier about the differences between the trash waste and recycling composting percentages, here's a visual representation of how things are today. Trash waste landfill occupies the majority of this chart. The recycling composting occupies a generous part of the chart, but could be better. So we want to improve that because there's a lot of raw materials out there that could be going towards back into the product stream. Speaking of product stream, now we move on to the data and statistics about freight shipment. So this is grams per ton of carbon emitted per kilometer. So for air freight, this is a data from a 747 freighter, capacity 113 tons. So it emits about 435 grams of carbon. 80 grams of carbon for trucks for about over 40 tons. 7.9 grams of carbon for bulk carrier and 5.9 grams of carbon for oil tanker, as well as 3.0 grams of carbon for a very large container vessel that you sometimes see at Port of New York or at Port of Los Angeles, and also in a lot of videos recently, especially coming from the Suez Canal. Now for passenger transport, emissions for different modes of transport, emissions per passenger per kilometer traveled. So domestic flight, its average is around 133 grams. So there's a secondary effect from high altitude, not CO2 emissions. So there's a additional factor. Long haul flight, 112 grams of carbon. Passenger car, one passenger in the car, 171 grams of carbon. For bus, 104 grams of carbon. Car, 4 passenger, so carpooling essentially, 43 grams of carbon. Domestic rail, 41% grams of carbon. Coach, 27 grams of carbon. And the high-speed rail is 6 grams of carbon. Eurostar is a high-speed rail in Europe. So this is referencing average diesel car, but I feel like the difference between diesel and petroleum gas is not significant. So the best bet, if you're not carpooling, is probably rail in this sense. Speaking of the Eurostar, it's based in London, United Kingdom, but it can also service Paris, Lyon, Marseille, Bourg and Maurice in France, also Brussels in Belgium, as well as Amsterdam in the Netherlands. As you can see in the following image, it also services the scenic and beautiful French Alps. That's in Bourg Saint Maurice. Now on to some statistics after that cool tidbit about the Eurostar. Now for the United States energy sources, this is a chart that represents the energy source distribution. Petroleum and natural gas dominates, about a third each from these kind of energy sources. Renewables is about 11 or so percent. Coal as well. Nuclear around 8%. So there's definitely a lot of leeway that could be done for renewables, especially it should be phased and into the coal sliver as coal miners retire. So natural gas. So here are some statistics about the grams of carbon per kilowatt hour emitted. So for natural gas, it emits about 464 grams of carbon. For coal, it depending on how it's produced, it emits 156 grams to whopping 870 grams of carbon. On the sunny side of things, solar emits about 41 to 48 grams of carbon. Geothermal 38 grams, hydroelectric is 24 grams, and wind is 14 grams. Nuclear is 12 grams, but nuclear also have other side effects that in some communities there are people that develop cancer and other items that is not explainable but possibly linked to nuclear. As we move forward to the next decade, here are some recommendations for the United States as well as elsewhere. We don't want to force this onto anybody, but we would like people to, at their own leisure, at their own free will, to follow these recommendations as closely as possible. In that way, we would have a better world. In ways, we want to encourage local protection from manufacturing goods to farming food to procuring beverage ingredients. We also want to encourage buying locally from goods to foods to beverages, including looking for signage at the supermarket that signals an item is a local product. So sometimes you can see at Whole Foods and Wegmans and other stores around the United States, there are descriptions that says local, they show a town, and we encourage those products moving forward. Expand freight railroads and balance long-haul trucking. So we want to balance out the carbon emissions without disrupting lives and jobs. We also want to introduce freight railroads to the truck interline hubs. So basically, long-haul trucking gets balanced out, but increased in local shipping to distribution centers and retail storefronts. Here are some of the symbols I was talking about regarding Whole Foods and Wegman. As you can see, it says logo. Like freight transportation, we also want to innovate the passenger transportation side of things. So, pretty much railroad will be the long haul and backbone of the transportation network globally per the recommendation. We want more regional commuter service, including for places like Scranton, the Poconos, and downtown in the Lehigh Valley and beyond. We want to expand use of park and ride lots at every station. This addresses the wide swath population distribution. Bus services cannot mitigate that, so we obviously want more park and ride lots at train stations. This removes headaches for commuters as well as others for finding parking at business districts and city center lots. So it also removes the price burden as well. So you can also help your local economy in that sense from the savings. Rail transport ride is more relaxing. So for a lot of people who take the trains, they can get some work done for a longer lunch hour with their coworkers to perhaps mingle a bit. And or read a book. For college students, do some homework, and so you can get more time with friends and classmates at college for other discussions, perhaps related to life outside or college homework. Or you can take a well-needed nap. Like our recommended innovations for freight transport as well as passenger transportation, we also want to innovate energy use for the United States. So we want to encourage conservation of petroleum and natural gas so we can save these resources for emergency use as well as future generations. In ways, these are the primary sources that can perhaps save humanity and as well as other species if in fact there is a supervolcanic eruption that blocks out the sun, or perhaps a minor asteroid meteor strike that also causes some kind of asteroid winter. These are emergency use sources that we need to conserve in case these things happens. We also want to increase use of renewable resources like solar, wind, hydroelectric, and geothermal energy. In ways, these we can even do our own selves on our roof. So solar, we can in fact cut down our electricity costs. So that's a benefit for solar. We also want to phase out coal as coal miners retire. We want to consolidate plants over time as coal miners retire. We want to encourage zero job loss. That's the biggest debate about coal is job loss. We want to encourage zero job loss. So baby steps, but we will get there. And innovate co-regions for the next generation jobs. Now on to biodiversity in the wilderness, from animals to plants to beyond. Here's Dr. Jackie Spiker with this part of the video. Jackie?
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I would like to talk with you today about biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of life in a particular habitat or in an ecosystem, and those variety of organisms can include birds and mammals. It can include frogs and insects, as well as fish in the water and plants both in the water and on the land. These organisms bring with them an extrinsic value, and that is a monetary value that might come from planting a farm or harvesting some trees in a woodlot. But they also bring with them intrinsic value, the value in and of themselves, knowing that we share the planet with these organisms and even that we can interact with them in some way. These organisms also provide ecosystem services on the planet that if we tried to replicate would cost up to $33 trillion a year. Those services can include nutrient cycling, recreation, water purification and oxygen release, even shading of streams and regulating temperatures around the globe. 50% of these organisms are at risk from climate change, and that can include even a change in 1 degree centigrade. So what are some things that we can do? We can educate ourselves and volunteer for organizations that maintain and support biodiversity. We can reduce our water usage and work to protect wetlands. We can conserve plants, forests, and field habitats, as well as planting additional trees, even changing our lawn from short grasses and allowing it to grow into a much higher edge. We can shop wisely and be careful with chemicals that we do purchase, and we can promote a more resilient Earth. Thank you for listening about biodiversity, and on to the next topic.
How cool is biodiversity? Thanks, Jackie. Now that Earth Day 2021 video has come to close, pretty much you can still do a lot of these things beyond the video. But unfortunately, recent events have been often politicizing the effort to improve our planet. That's unfortunate. We want everyone to be able to participate. We want to include everyone from Democrats to Republicans to Greens to Libertarians and to people from all walks of life, all political backgrounds, all gender spectrums, sex, race, ethnicity, religion, creed, etc. This way, if we are united, we can do much more than the current status quo. We definitely want to move to greener pasture for Earth Day 2021 and beyond. We also want to innovate the United States to be a globally competitive country, again in terms of infrastructure, and also our friends elsewhere. This way we can create a better Earth. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm thrilled to present this video for Science Club from NCC Monroe. Have a great Earth Day and take care. Happy Earth Day.